A federal judge in Texas is considering whether the state's border buoys along part of the Rio Grande near Eagle Pass should be temporarily removed. The Biden administration sued Texas, arguing the state overstepped its authority. Texas claims the state needs the buoys because the federal government is not doing enough to secure the border. The judge did not allow cameras in the courtroom, but outside of the courthouse, people had plenty to say about this case. For the first time, a court considered a challenge to Governor Abbott's border buoys on Tuesday. A key question in the lawsuit, whether Texas had the authority to install the 1,000-foot barrier without a federal permit.
We spent billions of dollars of taxpayer money on failed stunts.
Ahead of the hearing, activists rallied outside the Austin District Court, calling for the buoys to be removed.
This was done without due process. I mean, to get anything done down there by the river or in the river takes years to get permissions. How is this able to happen so quickly? This is all done above the law, and no one is above the law, like I said, not even Governor Greg Abbott.
That argument central to the DOJ's case, saying Texas needed permission from the U.S. Commission that regulates international waters. We also heard from a federal advisor who works on U.S.-Mexico relations, testifying that Mexico raised concerns on the highest diplomatic level over the buoys.
And there are some very simple reasons why we're having to do this. The primary reason is because Joe Biden is not doing his job.
Side by side with other GOP governors in Eagle Pass Monday, Abbott refuted the Biden administration's arguments.
And so it's highly recognized that buoys were acceptable and not a deterrent to navigable waters.
Assertions that will be up to the judicial branch, and Abbott has vowed to take the buoys to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary. The judge asked parties to submit written closing arguments by 4 p.m. on Friday and said he would issue a ruling as soon as possible. Now, joining us now is Jeremy Wallace, politics reporter at the Houston Chronicle and San Antonio Express News. Thanks for joining us, Jeremy. Jeremy, you were also in federal court with me earlier this week. What else stood out to you from the witnesses we heard from both the state and the U.S. government?
Well, the U.S. government made the case that this is, in fact, violating the Rivers and Harbors Act, that Governor Abbott put these buoys in the water without first getting clearance from the Army Corps of Engineers. So they've really kind of laid out that part of the case that, this isn't about immigration. This is about this Rivers and Harbors Act that Governor Abbott needed to get permission before putting it in. But the state has made, or the state has turned around and said, no. It's like, we didn't need that permission because these buoys are floating buoys. They're not the type of structure that was envisioned in this law originally, so we think we can put it in there. And they've challenged whether or not the river is a navigable river. The Rio Grande River is the fourth largest river in North America, yet they say there's not enough commercial traffic on the river to justify needing a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. So that's kind of where this fight lies. But one of the interesting developments for this, we didn't know how much the Mexican government had been upset with what was going on. They really detailed in the hearing, the federal government did, they had a State Department official who outlined how these buoys have produced 3 different diplomatic cables from Mexico. And so there's a lot of pressure, and it's kind of intruded into other Mexican-U.S. relations on other issues. Even in issues that aren't even related to the border, Mexican officials are bringing American officials to a side and say, hey, about these buoys, we see this as a violation of sovereignty and we don't like it.
And it's interesting, too, that was something that was brought up during the hearing. You heard the state try and bring up the politics of this and the judge saying, no, we're not touching the politics on this case, and even made a point during the ruling to say this is not going to be a political decision.
Yeah, there's a moment where you almost expect the judge to say, not here. We're not talking about immigration, because the state wanted to talk about the number of migrants coming across the border. They wanted to talk about the cartels on the other side, and the judge was like, no, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, did you comply with the Rivers and Harbors Act, and did you need to comply with the Rivers and Harbors Act? That is the whole crux of this issue. If the state can't prove that they were, then those buoys are going to get pulled out. And so that's where the state's going to then have to try to kick this up. You see, one of the arguments Abbott has tried to, or wanted to try to make, is that because he sees the state is under an invasion, his terms, not mine, because of that, he thinks he has additional emergency powers to do things that would normally supersede his current power. You didn't really hear that develop very well in the case, on Monday, but it's one of those things that kind of simmering in the background that could be very important on the appeal. When this goes to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, expect to hear that conversation more. Did Governor Abbott have more authority to do this and ignore that law because of this quote unquote invasion?
All right, Jeremy Wallace, I know you'll be continuing to track all of these developments, as will we. Thanks for coming on.
From buoys to barbed wire and boots on the ground, polls show a lot of Texans back the governor's plans to deploy more resources at the state border. The Texas Politics Project at UT Austin polled Texas voters in June. 59% said they support the border initiatives, with 26% opposing. 14% did not have an opinion at all. The poll does show a divide along political lines, though. 88% of Republicans polled support the policies, and that was also the case for 66% of independent voters. Interestingly, even 1/3 of Democrats almost supported the governor's border initiatives.
A new approach to reduce pregnancy-related deaths in Texas. It's focused on treating opioid abuse. How a nonprofit is stepping up after seeing more women needing help.